It's been a while since we've done one of these, but you
Well,
saw a movie.
it's because I don't watch movies anymore. Like,
Sure.
I cashed out my chips after after the last Avengers movie. Well, actually, the second to last Avengers movie because I never saw the ending.
I
I
mean,
think
that's reasonable, I guess. I haven't seen any of the Avengers movies, so
no,
you're not alone in missing the last one.
I'm trying to think in where I left off in moviedom because I think that the second Godzilla movie came after the first half of the last Avengers movie. So I think that was the last movie I saw in theaters. And I
Okay.
haven't done much watching since then. Like everything I've watched has been on. I've rented it on Amazon or something.
Sure.
Uh,
But
so
I
just
mean,
well,
deeper than that, we haven't had an opportunity to do what we're about to do, where we talk about a movie that you've seen and I have not, which seems to be the best way for us to put together movie reviews.
it seems like it's a good. It works well, but
It's
just
got that thing to it.
yeah, we got a good thing going. But just that quick catch up.
Sure.
There's so I've watched a couple of movies now. I rented the last Godzilla movie, Godzilla vs. King Kong, which
Okay.
my brother very aptly described as a D&D campaign for King Kong.
Huh.
And it's really funny. Like he said that, and I watched it, and I said that's 100% accurate. It wasn't even an exaggeration. It feels like you're watching someone's King Kong Dungeons and Dragons campaign.
In what sense?
In the sense of the obstacles he overcomes and how the things that he has to overcome keep changing. Like you're really watching the movie mostly from the perspective of King Kong and how everything's happening to him in the movie.
Sure.
But
Sure.
it gets ridiculous in its D&D like atmosphere to the sense that he finds an ancient chamber of his people with a magical weapon.
Oh. Oh wow. Okay.
All in all, I didn't dislike the movie. It was fun to watch, but it wasn't that great of a movie. But
But that's not why we're here today.
yeah, that's not why we're here. Nor are we here to discuss Sonic the Hedgehog, which was a fun movie, but also just felt like every other movie. Uh, I, I mean, it was nice that Jim Carrey was doing his old comedy routine again, but
Sure.
it's one of them things where it's like it's a watchable movie, but none of the characters were actually the characters that you thought they were going to be in the movie.
I see.
I mean, there really isn't much to the character of Dr. Robotnik in the games until it gets to the Dreamcast games, but even so, he's not much like the Jim Carrey Dr. Robotnik, so there is that. I'm just trying to rush through a couple of movies I've seen real quick because we're not going to talk about these ones.
Yeah, we don't need to talk about them at all. I mean, we could.
Well, this is fun. I'm trying to point out how few movies I've seen since I have seen the last Avengers movie, or even the last.
And you used to be a big movie guy. Like, you
I
used to see a
love
lot
going
of
to the
movies.
theater. I would sacrifice my intolerance of bad movies just to go to the theater and watch something sometimes. And
Yeah.
it became more often than not in a lot of cases. But it really just when I saw that first half of the Avengers movie, I said, "There's no way the second half is going to be as good. I'm cashing out now," and I never even bothered watching the second half because the first half was pretty good, but it was totally reliant on having seen a lot of the Marvel movies before it.
Mm-hmm.
It would not have had the impact it had if you hadn't. So it's not something that you can just sit down and watch and be like, "This is amazing."
Uh-huh.
I didn't actually think about it very much, but I'm willing to bet if I sat down and gave it a good once over in my head, I would come to the conclusion that if I tried to watch it without knowing anything about the other Marvel movies, it would be a wreck.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So that's about it. I mean, there was that Vin Diesel movie where he was the superhero. That one was okay, but again, nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary.
Not good enough that you remember the title.
Yeah, I know. It's Bloodshot, I think it was.
I have no idea. I've never
Something.
seen it.
We'll just say Bloodborne. It was Bloodborne.
It was Bloodborne.
But it all kind of goes back to that video you showed me with Razor Fist recently, where he's talking about
the pulp video.
Yeah, the what was it? Embrace, reject modernity, embrace pulp. Great video.
Yes, very good video.
But more to the point, I spent the past 2 weeks watching some movies that I had probably never fully watched before when I was younger because they were so violent at the time that I'm sure my parents didn't let me watch them.
Sure.
But I had never seen the Robocop movies. I'd seen pieces of them on TV occasionally, but I have never sat through them. So I decided I was going to. I sat through the first one. Thought it was okay. It was it wasn't quite up there to my standards of like the first Terminator movie and the first Alien movie, where just they nailed it, the whole atmosphere and everything. And I'll tell you what, they did not quite get how bad Detroit got down in those movies. It was a much more vibrant and lively Detroit, really.
Yeah. In the movie?
Yes.
Yeah.
The idea that there's that much corporate activity in Detroit is kind of laughable, but
well, I mean, it was a hypothetical future where, a hypothetical near future where OCP had taken over. So
I'm just taking pot shots at Detroit.
That's fine.
However, the character of Robocop and what happens in the movies is interesting and for the most part fun. The
pacing in that movie is excellent.
Yeah, the pacing is very good. They get right to the point of the movie right away. And the second one, it was okay. I was never too big on movies where it's like there's this big drug problem and all of the bad guys are junkies that act incredibly irrationally at some point in the movie.
There was a scene near the beginning of the second one that I couldn't get through, just because it was so violent. And this is when I was a kid. I haven't tried to watch it since. I've only seen the first Robocop movie in its entirety, but it's a very good movie in my opinion.
The second one was basically a repeat of the first one, and there wasn't much that it had to offer that the first one didn't already do. So the most interesting parts about the movie are probably the whole thing at the beginning where he's like investigating his former life and his wife thinks that he's still Alex Murphy, and I loved how they left it ambiguous where he's like, no, this is he actually confronts his wife and says, they just gave me this face to honor your husband. And but you can, the way they set it up, it's like you kind of feel like he's just saying that, because even after that there's a scene where he's watching her through a window as she's leaving the police station.
Yeah.
But apart from the fact that the second Robocop movie has one of my favorite movie endings of all time, it didn't really offer much, as much as the first one. It was the same thing. It was rehashed. And I haven't seen the third one yet, because I skipped the third one, because I know the third one has a reputation as being really, really bad.
Yeah, that's what I've heard too.
And I want to watch it at some point, but I didn't feel like sitting through a known bad movie, and I had heard that the 2014 one was okay. So I said, okay, I'll watch the 2014 one.
All right.
It was not a bad movie, but I'm pretty sure 60% of the movie was them telling you the premise of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's common to hour and a half movie to spend 35, 40... Wait, did you say 60% or 40%?
60%. It might be more...
like 40 minutes.
It could be closer to 70%. It was a lot of...
What do you mean by explaining the point of the movie? Because RoboCop is not high culture. It's not...
They thought they could make it high culture.
What do you mean?
Well, most of the movie is... The beginning of it is... do you remember how the first movie started, where he just shows up as this new officer, and like one of the first things he goes out on, he ends up getting torn apart and mangled and shot up, and he becomes RoboCop.
Yeah.
Well, in this movie, he's a lot more. He's a lot more like a television cop cop show officer where he's like hard-nosed and tough right from the beginning, and he's got this partner, and they're like, we're going to go out and, solve this big gun-running ring case, and, they present all of it really fast, so it's like he's been on this case, he's been working with someone, they were working undercover, and there were some corrupt cops they were trying to expose, and they decide to, the people he's after decide that he got too close, and they're going to set a bomb in his car.
Bump him off. Okay.
So they put a bomb in his car, blows him to pieces, and...
now, these are the crooked cops that do that.
No, this is the criminals that do it. The crooked cops tell the criminals,
to do it.
Yeah, basically that,
Okay.
So, it's a little bit different how it starts in that sense, where he's not actually... there's like... That's one of the big problems at the beginning with the villain, is you meet the villain pretty early on. He's not... Of course, the main villain. The main villains are the corporation in the movie. But the big criminal villain that gets everything off to a rolling start. In the first Robocop movie, they made no bones about how evil he was.
Yeah.
He was there when Alex Murphy was shot to death multiple times.
You mean Boddicker, right? Clarence Boddicker, right? The guy from That 70s Show.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
When he when he takes the gun and blows Alex Murphy's arm off in the beginning, he does that personally. Whereas in this movie, it's just like a car bomb that you don't even get to see. You don't even see the person who set the bomb. You just know that it's his people in some way. There's no real menace from this bad guy. He doesn't feel like any kind of serious threat to anything at all. And this comes to full fruition when Robocop randomly finds where these people are hiding and ices all of them and takes out the bad guy. And there's never a moment's doubt that he's going to succeed in this. And it's in a really, really strange way, too, because at the beginning of the movie, they present you with this piece of information where it's like, anything 50 caliber or above is going to tear your armor to pieces. You don't want to get shot with that. And when he actually goes to get the bad guys, the head honcho tells all of his men, 50 caliber rounds, aim for the head. They hit him with so much firepower, and most of it bounces off of him. He takes a couple of hits where he's knocked back an inch or so, but it's like they said this in the movie as if this was something he would have to be careful of, and he just wasn't, and they couldn't take him down for some reason, despite the fact that they were using exactly what we were told would take him down. It made no sense whatsoever, and then he just kills all the bad guys, including the big bad guy that was running everything. So he was... It's
not explained?
Yeah, it's not explained at all. He's done. The big menace of the movie was not a threat at all. He wasn't particularly menacing. He was just your average run-of-the-mill gun runner.
Well, it sounds worse than that. It sounds like they built him up as a threat, and then they had him do the things that would convince you that he was a threat, and then for some reason they just pull the rug out from under you, and you find out that he's not a threat?
Yeah, it was a completely easy takedown of this entire organization. It was just like, oh, someone used a phone that Robocop could track, and now they were all done. That's it. It's all over.
That's bizarre.
Do you remember how in Robocop, Boddicker would be there fighting against Robocop himself with his men?
Sure. Yeah.
And it's like at one point he doesn't even leave until one of his men tells him to get out. He's not taking any crap from anyone. Part
of his character was that he really enjoyed the confrontation. That's the same reason that he personally was instrumental in taking Murphy down, right?
Yeah. And in this movie, there was a point in the beginning of the movie before he was RoboCop where he was working with his partner, and they met the head of the organization. The head of the gun smugglers or whatever they were. They didn't really explain what they did. I just knew that they were running guns because that was kind of the thing they were doing at the time, but I don't know what exactly his criminal organization was. Because they never showed any of that stuff like they showed in RoboCop where he's making deals with other criminals and there's none of that. No development of this character whatsoever.
That's bizarre.
And when they're sitting at this table, they're in front of him, undercover, and they've got him fooled. And he just gets a phone call that exposes them from the dirty cops. And his immediate reaction is to get up and walk away and tell his men to kill them.
Yikes.
So and it's not that it has to be the same character as the one in the Robocop movie. It's just that there was nothing done with this character, and there was no reason to care that Robocop took him down. It's like,
there's no reason to really dislike him that much, other than that he's just a criminal.
Yeah, he's
criminal things.
He's just there to be arrested by Robocop and possibly killed.
As opposed to the very visceral feeling that you get against the Boddicker character when he basically helps to torture Murphy to death. Kills that one guy who worked for OCP. Is basically setting all kinds of crazy stuff happening and exploiting this and doing that, and weird.
But that's not really. I mean, it's an issue with the movie that kind of makes it less fun. Like, there's not really a bad guy that we're invested in the movie. Even the head of Omnicorp just kind of feels like this guy who's. It's like, okay, yeah, he doesn't really value human life that much.
Well, so even in RoboCop, the original, the OCP was a little bit more complicated than that, because it wasn't the head of OCP that was the big bad guy. It was like a second in command who was trying to usurp the rest of the corporation, right?
Yeah.
So, like, even that sounds flatter.
It's much flatter. The head of the corporation just wants to. Okay, so the premise of the corporation in this one is that they have these war machines that they've got deployed all around the world that are supposedly keeping peace, and it's like, oh, these are all automated things that. They can just go into a neighborhood. It won't put anyone's lives in danger, and they can force everyone to submit to various body scans and things to ensure that they're following, the law and everything. So the whole world has these machines, and they're it's like this big surveillance state run by robots, basically Skynet.
Okay.
And
it's a little less dangerous than Skynet.
Yeah. Yeah, and America is the one holdout. So you've got Samuel L. Jackson as... Do you remember in the first movie how they did that news thing where they would occasionally interrupt the movie?
Oh, yeah. That's one of the best parts of the movie.
Well, they completely failed to get that one right, but they tried. And it wasn't a bad part of the movie. It just they didn't understand what the first movie was doing.
Right.
There was a lot of that in this movie. They were trying to capture something from the first movie, but they didn't understand the first movie. So the news scenes, they weren't. They had Samuel L. Jackson as this newscaster who would stand up in front of this Minority Report kind of giant screens that he could pop up by moving his hands and everything. The fancy thing that everyone likes to do nowadays, where it's like a touchpad except it's just floating in the air. And he's basically this ridiculously biased news reporter that is for the removal of this act called the Dreyfus Act that is preventing these robots from being used in America to keep the peace. And so he's on this relentless tirade in the news to lead public opinion to the side of getting rid of this act that won't allow them to put these robots on the streets. And he's always...
Is his motivation fleshed out? Like, why would he do that?
His motivation is never fleshed out. They just have him as a character to... He's basically pro-Omnicorp and anti this one senator who's like, well, no, robots... We can't trust robots to make critical decisions. And they're... I kind of like what they did with it. They're really... They're making fun of biased media in a big way, up to the point where it's like, it's so obvious where he'll have the guy from Omnicorp on, and he'll let the senator say a few words, he'll have the Omnicorp president defend himself, and then he immediately just shuts off the senator's screen and goes, there you have it, folks. So it was kind of well done for what they were trying to do, but it wasn't exactly the same thing as what Robocop was doing, the original movie. In that one, the newscasters were the prime example of the newscaps, the kind of news that the song Dirty Laundry was talking about, where it's just like they're presenting all of this with a smile on their face, not really showing any bias. They're just talking about the thing in front of them. And then they're occasionally cutting to a happy commercial for a product that doesn't exist. Just to give you a sense of people aren't taking anything really seriously. And that's one of the things that nobody that worked on this movie really seemed to get. It's like Omnicorp was this big presence in Detroit in the original movie, where they were doing all these things that were, kind of, it was like really morally and ethically questionable, some of the things they were doing. And it was just presented as, well, this is what this company's doing, and there's nothing to really think about. The news was just very blasé about everything they talked about.
Sure. They were like cheery to a fault.
Yeah. They were always presenting it with a smile, and there wasn't really any side taking. There was just this complete disinterest almost.
Yeah, very numb.
Yeah, and that was the point. Everyone is kind of numb to everything in that movie. Where in this movie,
it's a brilliant satire.
Yeah, but in this movie, it was like it was a good job that they did of like showing look,
biased media instead.
Media is clearly very biased here, and the movie ended on Samuel L. Jackson with an American flag waving in the background and calling it the greatest country ever. And it's just like I felt like the movie was taking a pot shot at the war in Afghanistan. I'm pretty sure it was. So good on them for that. But it wasn't quite.
In 2014?
Yeah, in 2014. So weird. I'm not exactly sure what they were trying to say about modern times there, other than the news lies to you, which if people don't know that by now, I don't know what to tell them. I can't help anyone who thinks that the media tells the truth.
Yeah. Especially
after 2014. But okay, so the news thing, not too bad. At least they took it in a different direction, and they seem to have pulled it off right. So I don't have too many complaints here, but I do feel like they wanted to try and capture some of what the first movie did, and they didn't understand what it was doing.
Mm-hmm.
And apart from some minor qualifications about things like the Robocop costume and how bad it looked, it seriously, like, do you remember? Do you remember what the Tick looked like in the old Fox live action show?
Yeah.
How his suit, it was like obviously this styrofoamy looking kind of thing.
Yes.
Every time I saw Robocop from the back, it reminded me of that Tick suit. I couldn't get it out of my head. It was. I mean, it.
But I thought that they made him like really like skinny looking.
They did, but it wasn't.
But it still looks foamy?
It looks like it was designed by the person that designed that suit. It looked really fake. I'm pretty sure it was done in like CG probably for the most part, but it didn't look as good as the 1980s Robocop outfit, and that's pretty bad.
Which is an amazing piece, by the way.
Well, yeah, I mean,
the way that they did the practical effects of having his helmet off and making it look like his head dips going back behind the part of him that's skin. Like, I can't figure out how they did that. I haven't really looked into it, but like, I watched that movie recently. I was like, wow, the makeup effects in this movie are amazing.
Yeah, in this movie they didn't do that at all. He actually had a face mask that when he didn't have his visor down, he had this outline of his head that didn't do that at all, and it actually looked a lot like the face mask of the Tick.
No.
So it's there were a lot of things that I kept imagining him with little like RoboCop antennas on his head moving around.
Uh-huh.
I was like, just stick Patrick Warburton's face in there and tell me if you can tell the difference.
Right.
So there's another thing about the movie. I haven't gotten to the big thing yet, though, because, like I said, I sat through the movie and I was like, okay. I mean, it wasn't a big problem. There wasn't much substance to the movie.
Yeah.
And what they thought was substance was something that the original Robocop movie got through in like 3 seconds of footage.
Oh.
And they made it most of the movie. Most of the movie is him being put together, woken up, adjusting to his new life as a robot. And do you remember how in the first movie it was like, well, this isn't really Alex Murphy. This is Robocop. This is a machine we built with human parts in it.
Yeah.
Well, this movie, they start off, because of this act that they're trying to get removed, they're making the argument that if they put a human in a machine, in the body of a machine, then it can make these critical decisions.
Right.
And they go with that premise up to a point, and then the corporation realizes that their automated robots are able to make decisions quicker than the human one. They put him through some test where it's like the very end of the test, there's a child that's being held hostage, and he hesitates longer than the robot to take out the bad guys. So there's like a 5-second difference between the robot's performance and his performance.
But that's not the problem, right? Like, the problem is that the robots might make the wrong decision.
Yeah, like I said, they threw out the actual premise and like moved it into another direction entirely, where it's like, oh no, it's still he still has to be as good as the robots while at the same time being human.
That's bizarre.
And this leads to the problem of the movie. Like it doesn't even make sense. Like they wouldn't have sat down in front of the senator and said, "Look, we have a human being inside of this thing. He can make these decisions now. Now can we have these things on the streets?" And the senator probably would have said, "All right, well, this is a step in the right direction at the very least." Yeah. I don't think the senator cared that he took 5 more seconds to determine whether or not he should be opening fire in a room with a child in it. I think that's what the senator wanted. So it made no sense that they decided to do what they did next, which was to say, okay, well, what is the human brain really? If we can just make him think that he's making the decisions while he's in these combat situations, then as far as anyone will be able to tell, there's still a human being inside. So they mess with his brain so that he's able to outperform the robots. And this leads to problems later on, of course, but...
Well, so that's kind of interesting because it reminds me of the thing that people talk about sometimes where they're like, oh, you don't actually rationalize your decisions until after you've made them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's definitely some people who take that notion to the extreme. Was it something deep like that, or was it not anything like that?
Well, no, they did everything kind of in the reverse of what the first Robocop movie did, where it's like, he was supposed to be a machine, but then they're like, he's dreaming. Why is he dreaming? He shouldn't be dreaming. And that, it was like this, the idea was like, well, how much of him is human and how much is machine? And what is the value of human life? Whereas in this movie, it's like there's one doctor that's trying to do the right thing for a while, and then because of the pressures of the company he works for, he ultimately ends up doing all of these things that he doesn't want to do, like taking away more of Alex Murphy's humanity as the movie goes on. Oh. And, because at first it's like, okay, well, we'll just fiddle with his brain so that he thinks he's making these decisions that the AI is actually making. And then
sure.
After that, it's like, well, we're uploading all of this crime data into his brain, and then it gets to his own murder, and they're like, first off, I don't know why they decided to upload that into him. Did they think he wasn't going to have any kind of trauma from it?
Well, we'll uncheck the box for that one in the list, yeah.
But they didn't, and they decided to upload all of this information like seconds before they were going to put him in front of the public and in front of the media to talk about, coming back to the force, which didn't happen until halfway through the movie. Like, most of the movie is him in China in a research facility being put together and being put through the paces to understand how his robot body works, which the other movie didn't.
Is that part at least really cool?
No. I mean,
because there was that really funny thing. I've seen clips of it from Robocop 2, where they were trying to make another Robocop, and there was a whole bunch of stop motion animations of their failures.
Yeah. There was nothing like that in this movie. It was just like they were over explaining how everything works, and
Was
maybe
was
not.
at least the technobabble like really good? Was it like really like
It was
oh,
not.
this is like really well researched, or no?
No, it wasn't. There was a lot of stuff where it's like they showed a scene where they were pumping blood out of his system, cleaning the blood, and pumping other things back into his system, and talking about caloric intakes, and you know, throwing these numbers out there, just technobabble that you didn't need. The first movie was just like,
Well,
oh,
there could be technobabble that you don't need, but that is cool. Like this isn't that.
no, it went on for way too long. I mean, it was like 20 seconds too long for the blood transfusion thing, probably, and
well, that would be. I mean, like you could set that up so that it was really cool, right? You could be like, okay, so this is what's going on. His system still operates on a blood based thing, but what we have is these things that inject artificial adrenaline into the system to speed up his reaction time and increase his this and that. And then we also notice that like, hey, by the way, because the system is blood based and still biological, that puts an upper limit on his like operational time before he needs service, and you could use that as like a plot point later on.
Well, we don't use plot points in movies anymore. I mean, he wasn't supposed to be able to take 50 caliber slugs, but he did.
I guess that's a fair point.
And furthermore, the scene where they're showing the transfusion happening, it's one of them scenes. And I know I'm the last person that should talk when it comes to talking down to people, because I talk down to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But the movie kind of talks down to you during the whole scene where they have the assistant scientist reading off what's going on during the transfusion while they're showing it. And I'm watching the scene and I'm thinking, if I muted this scene to where I couldn't hear anything and I just watched the sci-fi happening in front of me, it would be a much better scene.
Was it visually really cool? Was it like
not really cool, but it explained a lot without saying anything, and they felt the need to say things. It was kind of like, it always reminds me of the movie The Ring, where in the Japanese version things would happen and you would understand what's happening, and in the American version there was one of the characters would act as narrator and explain what was happening, and you're like, I got it, it's good, move on.
Yeah, it's a horror movie. Like, I get it.
There was a lot of that in this movie. And do you remember how it was a big deal in the first movie when they found out he was dreaming?
Vaguely.
Oh, I mean, it was a big deal. They were like, oh, he shouldn't be dreaming. This is a problem. Well, this movie, they start with him more human than robot. So they're like, okay, he's having a good dream. And they're like observing his dream, and they're like, they're basically presenting it as he's really, really happy in this dream, and now they've got to wake him up and show him what he's become, and he's not going to be happy about that. And because he is...
I mean, I could see that. I could see that being interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it would be, and I thought that they would keep going with it, but they spend, 40 minutes of the movie, probably, just in this whole getting him ready to go back into service. Whereas, in the first movie, he's in the action right away. You're getting introduced to characters right away. All the other characters besides him basically had no character. Maybe the doctor that was working on him, but that was it. It was like him and the doctor were the only people that really mattered in the movie. Even his wife and kid, nothing they did was of any consequence. They were basically there to be a hostage at the end, and that even didn't matter because the guy that would potentially have held them hostage basically let them walk away. But yeah, so his character is the only one that's kind of being developed, and it's not really being developed. You just know that there's a guy in a suit, and he's slowly being turned into more machine than man.
Okay.
Whereas in the first movie, he's basically more machine than man as soon as he gets back to the police force, just with the way he talks and the way he walks. And that's kind of the point of everything that happens with the characters around him. Like, his partner is looking at him like, but you really are Alex Murphy, aren't you? And,
and he's confused for the first good chunk of the rest of the movie about that.
Yeah, and that's a very important part of the movie, whereas his personal identity in this movie is almost of no relevance. It's like almost everything banks on this doctor who is making these decisions of whether to make him more or less human, and he keeps caving and making him less human until everything gets so out of control that he has to run and go rescue Robocop and be like, you've got to get out of here, they're trying to kill you.
Well, wait. Is there some really cool development with this doctor character where he finally decides to fight back, or where he where he has some really good dialogue or even monologue where he's talking about how this is taking its toll on him or anything like that? Like there's good story development there, maybe?
Well, there's a little bit of kind of a message the movie wanted to get across. They did an okay job with where so he's got all this data for crime in his head. He's got the entire crime network uploaded into his head, and he immediately starts making these connections that these are the corrupt cops. This is how they did it. This is where the evidence is. The thing is that is
so that sounds really cool. That sounds like, okay, so the original RoboCop was not a detective. This sounds like a detective.
Yes, but it all happens in the space of 5 minutes because they filled most of the movie with him being strapped to a thing and being put together and them messing with his head until they got their robot cop right. He really he goes back to the scene of his own crime, looks at the evidence. And then they show a quick, view of inside where he's looking at all the people connected with things. He goes and finds some random criminal, says, where can I find X person? He goes and finds that person. This all happens in a couple minutes. Then he finds out where the big bad guy is. Storms...
Is it... Hold on. Is it played as, really stunningly cool that he figures all this out so quickly? Because you could do that, too.
Not that part. There is one part where when they're first uploading the data, he's just as he's watching it being uploaded inside his head, he's sitting there with this wide-eyed expression I have evidence for 132 arrests right now. And then he's like, no, 166. And that part was cool. And they took it, they only took it so far as, well, now we know he can make these connections easily. Probably the last really cool thing that happened was the way that when they put him out in front of the media, before he was supposed to, be presented to the public, and instead of that, what happens is he's looking up over the crowd because okay, so it's very important to know. You remember how I said they uploaded his own murder into his head, and that kind of made him go crazy?
Yes.
So they were supposed to be putting him out in front of the public at that point. And so he starts to go crazy, and they're like, we have to do something. And so they mess with his head some more. And that's what ultimately, breaks him and takes him from being human to being much more machine. So when they actually do present him to the public, he's, in the space of a second, transformed more into a machine than a man. He walks right by his wife and doesn't say anything. And he walks out in front of everyone, and he's scanning the crowd. They showed him for probably a lot longer than they needed to, scanning everyone he walked past, and it was just coming up, non-threat, all this, visor, helmet stuff. And then he spots one criminal in the crowd, and he points at him and says, you're under arrest. And the guy goes running, and he jumps after him and catches him. And that's how he is first seen by the public. And, he kind of becomes a 5-second legend in the news because of that. It's look what this guy, look just how effective this Robocop is. That was about as far as that whole thing went. A lot of the first Robocop movie was devoted to him coming into the force, and suddenly there were all these arrests being made by this robot cop, and he was very effective, and the corporation was really proud that they had put this thing on the streets, and they were getting a good reputation from it. And you got to actually see him do a lot of the things that this kind of dystopian cop would be doing.
Yeah.
In this movie, that was about as far as it went, where he actually did something like that. The rest of it was just all right, we've spent way too much time pretending to build character for the Robocop and over-explaining what Robocop is, because apparently Robo and Cop is not an easy enough way to figure out what the movie's supposed to be about.
Yeah.
So they then have him really quickly solve his murder and take out all the people who plotted to murder him. Then he goes back to the police station.
Yeah.
And confronts the two cops that were crooked and were, stealing and falsifying evidence to protect the criminals.
Yeah.
One of them tries to pull a gun on him, which is probably a
bad idea.
Yeah, I just don't know. Someone wrote that, and they should feel ashamed. But he gets a confession, and this is a kind of a weird part of the movie, though, because he gets a confession out of the other crooked cop who says it was the police chief all along. Immediately believes him, marches into the chief's office, pulls a gun on her, and tells her that. And it's kind of funny because she almost immediately confesses that by saying, "You don't understand, the circumstances were different," or something like that. But he pulls a gun on her and says, "Well, confess here in front of everyone," which isn't a confession if you pull a gun on someone and force them to do it. Which you would think, being a robot cop, that would be like in his internal manual. It's like, this wouldn't be valid evidence.
Yeah.
But she basically did confess before he even pulled the gun. And at that point,
right, but
they had this military dude who had a conflict with Robocop in the beginning of the movie when they were testing him. It was like the military guy was like, "I just need the robots. I don't need the man inside the machine." And so he kind of wanted to prove that he wasn't as good. And at some point, he became in charge of watching things that Robocop was doing through his visor. And when he saw that happen, he shuts down Robocop. And so Robocop just collapses in front of this corrupt police chief. And
who is in the middle of a confession.
Yeah, that everyone saw.
With witnesses. Yeah.
Yes, with witnesses. And they have
this... But the thing about that is that really, like... Okay, so the really cool trick that was at the end of Robocop that, you may have expected but maybe not, was the hidden fourth directive, right? Where he couldn't attack members of OCP's executive committee, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. It's like, oh, we put this failsafe in there so that he could never, get us for any crimes that we do. And that was like the little thing that gets you, right? It's like, oh, they set this thing up and they just revealed it right now, right when, he needs it. He can't do what he needs to do to solve this crime. But if this happens like right after he just barely starts, then doesn't that give the whole game away?
Well, it would, and that's... I feel like a lot of times these things are written by people who think they are far more clever than they actually are.
Okay.
The route that they went with that is, after they shut him down, all the head of the corporation and his minions, because there's no boardroom in this one. There's no group of people that actually run the company that are, chewing the fat at any point.
Yeah.
There's just the military dude, a press secretary, the head of the corporation, and some woman whose job they didn't really explain that well. And
secretary?
They're all... maybe. It seemed like she was more than a secretary, but I'm sure that they said it at some point, but it was so uninteresting that, it didn't matter. They may as well have just said another board member.
I guess that's fair.
But she's sitting with, the other three, and the head guy is sitting around with them, and he's like, "All right, well, how are we gonna take care of this?" And, what's the problem? He solved... The head of the corporation is just like, "What's the problem?" He solved the crime, and the head of marketing is like, "Okay, here's the problem." He almost immediately found all this evidence of corruption in the police department, and everyone was fine with that. But when it got to the point where he got to the chief of police, this has a lot of politicians worried. Because if this is the kind of cop that's going to ferret out crime within the police department, that goes as high up as the chief, where does it stop? Will it stop at senators and other bureaucrats? Will it stop at the president? They're sitting there. They spend 5 seconds talking about this, so the direction.
Well, no, but but hold on. Like if the head of OCP is not a bad guy in this, then or is the head of OCP also a bad guy in this?
He's a bad guy. He is the bad guy, actually.
So in the original RoboCop, that would be like a time for like the actual head of OCP to be like, yeah, we want to get rid of corruption. We want to have people have trust in their public, in the public institutions, including us.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, in the original RoboCop, even the bad guy wanted that. He wanted the politicians to be called out as corrupt because he wanted more power within the city of Detroit. He wanted to spread his influence.
Yeah, but I mean, like the head of OCP, but in the original movie, the head of OCP would have been like, "What are you talking about? We're not evil."
Yeah,
and that would have been interesting.
Yeah, but no, in this movie, it's just like he's the head of a corporation, and it's 2014, so naturally he has to be the most evil person in the whole movie. And it was a very banal evil, so it wasn't even interesting. It wasn't even like I mean, it kind of didn't make sense the way that he did everything. But even so, they're all like, okay, so we don't want bureaucrats to get worried. We're trying to talk to them to get them to remove this bill so that we can put more of our products out there, which is the only reason this made sense. They wanted politicians to feel more secure in what they were doing so that they could get them to do what they wanted. So they immediately decide that, okay, we'll just say that he had a seizure there and we'll kill him. So now they're going to kill Robocop. They've got him. They hook him back up in the lab, and they call in the doctor, and they're explaining to the doctor that they need to do such and such to kind of make this situation disappear. And the doctor is furious because this has been a long part of his life's work, and he was promised all of this research and all of this funding for his research. And he basically says, you give that family whatever they want. I want 10 years of research, unobstructed. And he caves and says, do whatever you're going to do. And then he immediately runs off to go and save Robocop. So they all think he's on their side, which was the funniest thing because it was clear that he was angry with them. Like just looking at his expression, they had to know he was angry with them. But
you can be angry and you can be cowed at the same time.
Yeah, but I mean, they didn't take any precautions. So basically, he was able to just walk out of there and run back to his lab and warn them that they were sending assassins to kill Robocop. And so he wakes Robocop up, unhooks him from the machine, unhooks him from the transmitter that lets them shut him off, which was on the side of his head, and he was able to pull off with his hand. So it was like on there with a magnet. It's just like, oh yeah, this is the thing that like lets us shut you down if we need to.
Wait, Robocop pulled it off with his hand, or the doctor pulled it off?
The doctor did. No. If Robocop had, that would have been even more ridiculous. It's just like, why am I even letting them do this?
Well, he could conceivably not know.
Well, no, that's the point. It's like he wouldn't have pulled it off himself because he didn't know. But,
well, no, he might also be forbidden from doing that. That might be like one of his directives.
But it's like seriously just on there with a magnet or something because the doctor pulls it right off. He's just like, I'm taking this transmitter off of you. And it's a transmitter, which that means it needs a signal.
Well, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's like, it would seem to me there would be places where, like, you would want... If you thought a robot was going to go out of control and this robot was capable of going somewhere underground and massacring people, you would want to make sure that you would be able to send a signal in a way that it... I don't know. I mean, I don't know how the signal works. Maybe there's antennas all over modern...
Well, there might be... I mean, I don't want to try to rewrite it for them, but, like, there might be something that prevents Robocop from entering areas where the signal's not permitted, or the signal might piggyback on some other fairly ubiquitous signal, like cell phone signals or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's not even a matter of rewriting. It's just a small thing. Just a thing to note that it's just like this magnet clip transmitter.
The magnet clip thing is the hard part because Robocop is designed for highly kinetic use in highly dangerous situations. So if this thing is just magneted onto the side of his head, it's going to be the first thing to go.
Yeah,
it would have been hilarious, for instance, if they had basically cornered him and they were shooting at him and they were like, oh, we'll just shut him down once we got him cornered, and they try to shut him down but they can't because the transceiver got damaged. That would be interesting, and then he turns the tables. Like, that would be a thing that you could do, but apparently they did not.
I mean, they could have done a lot in the movie, but they did what they did, and
Yeah.
they even used that fourth directive thing. They didn't. I don't think they called it directives, but
Okay.
at the end of the movie, there's a standoff between a one-armed RoboCop and the president of the corporation, in which RoboCop tries to pull his gun on him and can't because of programming. They don't even call it the fourth. Like, I don't understand why they couldn't use the term fourth directive as a callback to the movie.
That would have been great.
It would have been appropriate. I mean, it's a remake of.
It would have been both reasonable and acceptable and expected.
Yeah. Plus, this movie completely lacked any foreshadowing of that, other than other robots that saw property belonging.
You can't foreshadow something in a remake. That's just not gonna happen.
Well, that's true, but it's like, okay, so they did it a little differently. Like in the first movie, you saw a scene in his visor where he saw the first three directives, and then the fourth directive was classified, and
yes,
and that was all you saw of that for just a second. So they just flashed it
until the end of the movie. Yeah.
So and then it's like it's one of them things where you get through the whole movie, you've probably forgotten about it, and then it happens. You're like, oh, I remember that. Yeah, that's good foreshadowing.
It's about right. I mean, it's a little. I would almost have preferred that they didn't even mention the fourth directive until it shows up as a plot point. But I mean, you can do it that way. I'm not going to complain too much.
In the new movie, it was a little bit more blatant, where the robots that they had defending the Chinese facility saw RoboCop when he first realized he was a robot, and he tries to run away. He runs out into this courtyard where all these E209s are, and they look at him, and they got their guns pointed, and then they get the little red flashy thing in their own visors that says Omnicorp property, do not fire. Yeah, and they kind of just let him run off. But
so that's really weird that it's Omnicorp property in general, because Omnicorp property could be hijacked and used by anybody.
Yeah, and not just that, but.
That makes the fourth directive stupid.
Well, no, that kind of it's a completely different thing, because if that's supposed to be foreshadowing for the reason why RoboCop can't open fire on or even pull a gun on the president of Omnicorp, well, Omnicorp president is not property of Omnicorp. Is that?
I guess you're right. Do you think they were trying to do like a bait and switch where they're like, oh, Directive 4 is don't attack Omnicorp property, and then you get to the scene and you're like, oh, but Directive 4 doesn't affect RoboCop's ability to attack the CEO, and then they're like, "Oh, but it does," and you're like, "What?"
Yeah, it kind of was like that. There was also this thing where
that's like the worst way you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, it quite actually makes zero sense.
it makes negative sense. It's like
because, like you said, someone could use Omnicorp property for other means than what Omnicorp wants.
No, but I mean, from like a plot writing perspective, it's even worse, because it's like we know that you have this expectation of what Directive 4 is. We show you that it isn't what you think it is, and then later on, it just is what you thought it was anyway, with no explanation. That's dumb.
And not only that, but when he's having this confrontation, it's like he's... So the robots that are defending Omnicorp apparently can't open fire on anyone who's unarmed. So the E209s are actually pretty effective, because it's like, oh, this person is unarmed, I won't shoot at them. But
that's cool.
The cops are coming to the rescue of RoboCop. They smash a SWAT van into Omnicorp's buildings and run into one of the E209s. But because all of the cops jump out and hold their hands up in front of the robots, like one of them gets in front of RoboCop and holds his hands up so that they can see he's not armed, and so they can't fire on him. And so that's how they save RoboCop. But
do they know that that's one of their things?
I guess so, but it's kind of funny that you can just smash up the Omnicorp building and stand in front of the robots and trespass on the property, and the robots are just like, oh, okay.
I love the fact that ED209's weakness has evolved from staircases to jazz hands.
Yeah. Oh, God, that's great. I mean, it was pretty bad that it was staircases to begin with. I
Well,
thought
staircases you could believe, because, like, it's the stairs are the wrong size for the giant Ed 209 feet, and, like, you kind of guess it as you see it trying, and you're like, oh, this is going to go poorly. And, like, it's stupid, but it's like, if you didn't expect this gigantic thing to be walking around in urban combat, but you expect it to be, like, on street corners, you almost are like, okay, I can kind of see that design flaw.
which they kind of made fun of even that in the second Robocop movie, where one of them stepped on a manhole and fell through.
Oh, jeez.
But yeah, I don't think that the movie was terrible. I think it's watchable, but I think that way too much of the movie was spent on him being, strapped to this machine where they're just working on him continuously and trying to work out all these bugs.
See, that part sounds really cool to me, though.
Well, I mean, if it had been done in a more, there wasn't much substance to it, is the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I get what you're saying. It's just like I kind of actually want to see it now, just to be like, is it as bad as that, or is it maybe that there was some techno stuff going on that was more subtle, or I don't know.
Well, there was a little bit of subtle stuff, but there were a lot of things that kind of made me laugh. Like when they opened up his head and he just had a line of integrated circuits over the hemisphere of his brain, as if his brain hemispheres had these circuit inputs built into them for some reason. But they literally were just sticking in his brain.
Yeah.
So it's like science.
I take the metal parts and I stick them in the squishy parts, therefore science.
And I'm pretty sure that all he did is remove a NAND gate, and for some reason this changed Robocop's behavior.
Oh, that's funny.
It's like, I don't even see anything as advanced as a 6502 in there. What?
This is a prototyping board. It's obviously a prototyping board.
It's all gooey and squishy.
Yeah.
Thank God the brain has no nerve centers. Did you just stick these things in there? Yeah, I mean, it looks cool. They do something, right? No,
cool.
It just looks like science.
It just looks sciencey, and that's all we care about.
But yeah, they didn't give enough interesting technobabble to make those scenes worthwhile. And the technobabble they did give was literally just them, like, here's technobabble. It doesn't have to even fit the scene it's in. Just have it.
Sure.
When they're testing his abilities, it's just an excuse to have an action scene of him destroying other robots. The battle scenes aren't particularly interesting. It's just a lot of him like swerving to the right and left while holding two guns. I mean, basically, if it's one of them scenes where I watch and all I can think of is the scene from The Simpsons where what was it? Lenny asks if he can hold his gun sideways.
I haven't seen that one in ages.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of that, but an entire battle scene.
Yeah, fun.
And it kind of just exists to build the rivalry between Robocop and this guy who should have nothing to do with the rest of Robocop's life, but apparently does. Oh, what else? Oh, no, there actually is a scene before he goes after the Omnicorp president where he runs into that guy in particular, and he's another person that he can't fire on. So he basically just has to run from that guy.
The guy's like working with the Omnicorp president. He's a bad guy, or
yeah. He's
you said rival, but rival doesn't usually mean bad guy.
No, Robocop's rival.
Sure, but
he's like
that doesn't mean
he's part of this military division of Omnicorp where he takes the robots into combat in foreign countries, and they were using him to evaluate whether or not Robocop was effective. So he's like,
wait, that's even worse then, because if Robocop finds out that he can't shoot on OCP personnel with this guy, and then he tries it again a few minutes later with the president, that's even worse.
Yeah, it's definitely worse. Can't really say that I have anything to offer as an explanation, but there it is.
Stupidity? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can get through the movie. If you want to see how they do the whole Robocop life story thing, then I wouldn't say don't do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm probably not ever going to watch the movie, but, like,
But it's really not particularly interesting, and it really is.
That's the thing, right? Like I'm thinking back to like the when the Deus Ex Human Revolution, the first one, the newish one that came out after a long delay after the second one, where it was like there was a lot of really cool technical underpinnings, and like there was a lot of like how you were playing as Adam Jensen and how he felt about what had been done to him, and him finding out gradually that things weren't that exactly as he expected them that they were, things like that. Like that game is a really good example of the human robot kind of line and pressing on it.
Oh, well, that's the thing, too. In the case that you're giving, there's stuff happening while he's coming to all these conclusions and while the character is being developed. But during the time that Robocop is sitting there being created and tested and working out the bugs, so to speak, during all of that time, nothing's really happening. And you're just like, isn't he supposed to at some point end up in Detroit fighting crime? Why did they bring him all the way to China to do this for a start? And obviously they were making some commentary because they had this lab with all these Chinese workers doing stuff with things that they never really said what they were doing. But they didn't do anything. Nothing happened. Like at one point, when he first woke up, he just sort of ran away. He was like, "Oh my God, I'm a robot. I'm an ugly robot now. I don't know what's going on. I'm out of here."
Why did they? What is running away going to help? I have no idea.
There's a very Charlton Heston moment.
Yeah.
It was like, why? But it really didn't make any sense. It's there was no reason for the freak out that he had.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's the other thing that's bugging me is like, okay, like imagine if you woke up tomorrow and your body was a robot. You wouldn't run away. That doesn't make sense as a reaction.
Well, it's not just that.
Figure out what the hell happened.
It's really not just that. Like, he wakes up and he goes, "What's going on?" And there's this doctor right there to tell him, "You were in an accident. We fixed you as best we could, and we're still trying to fix you. And we just need you to stay calm." And I don't think anyone's reaction would be to look at their robot body hooked up to a machine and run away. I mean, I think at the very least, some sense of self-preservation would be like, well, they have me hooked up to this machine. If I want to stay alive, I should probably stay here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like you have much of a chance out on your own.
And it's like, I mean, you're not exactly hyperventilating since they've given you new lungs, so...
Yeah.
So what is going on here that is causing this freak out? It's just like trauma, I get, and I get that you can wake up and be like, "Oh my God, this is..." But like, on your worst day ever, can you imagine much more than waking up and just like, you're just like, man, this is horrible. I don't know what to do about it.
But like, you could do cool things with that. Like, you could have him actually start hyperventilating, and there could be something like, he's removed the clock limiter on his respiration circuits. I'm not doing a very good job of it, but you could write something really cool about that,
like they did in the first movie, yes. And this is getting to probably the biggest point that I want to make about this movie. I mean, apart from the fact that they overextend themselves on the origins of Robocop, which the original movie took care of in the space of a couple minutes.
And did a good job at it.
A very good job at it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like
There's the scene where they have him, like, track a pen, and they, wake him up, and they're having the party because, like, they actually activated him, and he's, like, kind of like the centerpiece of the little party that they're having, and then they're showing how he eats, and I mean, like, they do it quickly, but there's a lot in there.
Well, there's a lot of storytelling technique that is designed specifically to give a sense of time passing without actually having to show all the time passing, and that is what
they
this
do a really good job of
that.
The turn on and the shutdown, and the turn on and the shutdown.
It's like, I mean, there's that, and there's, like you said, the really quick scenes of the tests he was getting. You had a sense of he had been through this whole process, and the people in his life had passed for them as well.
Yeah, that they had kind of, well, they had been told in the original RoboCop, they had been told that he was dead.
Yeah, and
so they moved on with their lives.
Oh, okay. So here's
in his absence.
Here's one of the subtle storytelling ways in which you kind of show people that time has passed. The way in which his partner first starts to become suspicious of something being weird about Robocop, and slowly comes to the realization that this is her former partner. The fact that he has been away so long that it takes a while for it to click with her is a way to express that he has been away that long and that time has passed.
Yeah.
There isn't really much of that in this movie because they're keeping his wife up to date on everything, so they're taking forever to get through this process. Meanwhile, his wife is like, when do I get to see him again? When do I get to see him again? And this constant nagging is the only real indication that you get that any time is actually passing.
It's really weird because there's no reason why she shouldn't be able to see him, number one. And number two, he's not going to be a human to her in the way that he would have been to her.
Well, that's not
that makes sense.
It's not entirely true, though, because in this movie they start from he's still Alex Murphy when they bring him back from.
But how much of him has been replaced with robot parts? A lot.
All
of him?
Except for like his head, basically. Like they actually show a scene where he wants to see just how much of him is left that's human. So they give him a mirror and they pull away all the extra parts, and he's basically just a torso with artificial lungs and a head with a brain.
Yeah, I mean that. There's a lot you could do there, but like, it seems like that person wouldn't be able to go back to being a family man.
Well, he sort of comes to that conclusion on his own,
which is fine. You could, I mean, that could be one of those things where, like, we thought, they could run it as, we thought we would be able to save more of you. We thought we'd be able to make you more human than we ended up being able to do, and like there could be some character development. There could be some pathos there.
I would also like to point out that his freakout happened before they showed him how much of him was still human.
Yeah, no, I mean it doesn't make a lot of sense.
Like that was the point at which it's like, if they had started with here's what's left of you, here's what we gave you, and put him back together, and then he freaked out and ran off, it would have made a bit more sense because.
Yeah, that would make a lot more sense.
But he had just woken up, and they were like, "Yeah, here you are. You're basically in a robot body." And then he was like, "Oh my god!" and runs away. It's like, we're gonna have to explain the robot body to you. Please come back.
There's a user manual. You're gonna need to be aware of some things. Things are a little bit different now.
It's like everyone who loses their legs. And ends up in a wheelchair, just like rockets out of the hospital at 20 miles an hour, rolling them wheels, and then falls face first on the cement. It's just...
Yeah.
I think it would have been better if he just refused to believe he was a robot. That would have been a better movie. Just imagine some guy that like loses both of his legs in some kind of machining accident. Or gets run over or something, and it's just like, you're in a wheelchair now. He's like, I'm not.
there could be a lot. There could be something to a comedic take on Robocop.
I would call it not Robocop.
Well, no, I mean,
then the sequel would be not Robocop. I don't care what they say.
No, I'm thinking more like the things that you would do if the things that you would put on a robot body if you wanted it to be funny when the guy inside the robot body reacted to the robot body. Like he gets up and he runs out and he finds out that there's a speaker on his shoulder that's playing yakety sax as he runs away.
Oh, we need to make this movie. I feel like it wouldn't,
and that brings him back to sanity. Like he's like, okay, even my body knows that what I'm doing is stupid.
No, even better. It's like, okay, you got me.
Yeah.
But so the big problem with the way they presented it in reverse is exactly that everyone treated everything the exact opposite as the original RoboCop movie. Like, from the outset, everyone was like, oh, he's still human. And as he became more of a machine, they treated him more like a human.
Oh,
and
that's weird.
It gets to a point where they're talking about things like, well, he's resisting our programming, which wasn't something that it didn't make too much sense in the context of what they had said previously. And they have a scene where the doctor is testifying near the end of the movie after what happened. He's like, well, we don't really understand everything that happened, and we don't understand why, he was able to change certain things. At one point in the movie, they're like, oh, he's resisting our programming, or he's changing, he's reversing everything we've done. Now, resisting the programming, they kind of did some of that in the original movie, but there was
You could make that cool. You could make that really cool.
Well, they were going at it from the angle of like, well, what's causing it? A soul? They actually asked that at one point. They don't just imply it. They have to have someone say it because they need to talk down to the audience. And it's like,
could it be the human brain that is still attached to this mechanical body?
It could very well be. Given that we don't understand everything about the human brain to begin with, that is a very good angle that they could have gone with. And instead, they immediately say, well, our science doesn't understand it, so obviously you're claiming...
So let's stop thinking about it.
Yeah, obviously you're claiming that it's just a soul that's doing this. There's some soul rewiring the programming. In the first movie, he was able to have an underlying operation of his own. Well, no, it was the second movie. In the second movie, he had a conscience that was operating underneath the layer of the programming. So when they tried to change him into a machine that was lecturing kids on respecting their parents and being exceptionally nice to people, like, hey, it's a beautiful day out there, and all that weird stuff, that they basically used 5 minutes of the second Robocop movie as a comedy portion to say, well, what if he had to do these public service things instead of being a cop? And
well, I mean, the original Robocop series was very satirical. That's a thing that they definitely were trying to do.
Yeah, but my point is that in the second movie, when they're forcing him to do that through this new programming, after they buzzsaw him to pieces in the second movie, and when they put him back together, Omnicorp is like, well, we can do a little more with Robocop, can't we? We can have him talk about the climate change in front of a podium and things like that, and have him be more socially conscious. And after they do that to him, for about 5 or 10 minutes in the movie, he's going around and he tries to arrest a corpse at one point, and his partner is just like, he's dead. What do you do? Why are you reading him his Miranda rights? And he just sort of looks over and looks back at the corpse, and he's like, oh. And then they've got all these kids, like these elementary school kids that had trashed this guy's store and beaten him up. And he's giving a lecture to these kids about how they need to be respectful and what would their parents think, and all the kids are like, there's something wrong with him. And so they all just run away. And he's like, wait, I'm still talking to you. And
but I mean, I think the point of that was to be ridiculous.
It was, but
right?
That's not quite where I'm going with it just yet. I'm not complaining about that so much.
Okay.
What I'm getting at is when he goes back to the doctor in the police station.
In the 2014 movie.
No, in the second movie.
In the second movie.
She's already come to the conclusion that they messed something up in his programming, and they're making him do all of this. And
was the second one the one where he had 450 directives and they got all goofy because of that?
Yeah, and he was basically going crazy underneath it, but he must scream, but he hath no mouth kind of thing,
Yeah. No, there's definitely kind of like a. Yeah,
and
I remember hearing about that, although I've never seen the movie.
Well, it was a great scene because the doctor explains what's going on to his partner, and his partner's like, well, can't you do anything? She goes, I can run 3,000 volts through him, but there's every chance that it would kill him. I don't know what to do. And then Robocop immediately stands up, walks outside of the police station to a power box, rips it open, and grabs both ends of these wires and shocks himself.
I remember seeing that clip. Yeah.
And then he's fine after that. So that whole thing that they did was just gone after that, and it was just that was just some satirical point that they were making in the movie.
Sure.
It was, so I mean, they did that in the second RoboCop movie. In this movie, they weren't in the 2014 movie. They weren't really doing anything like that. They were just slowly taking bits and pieces of him away, and then he just decided to put the bits and pieces back somehow. There was no explanation.
Oh, okay. So I can see how that could be both good or bad.
It was not the good way. The good way would be like, well, there's some triumph of the human spirit over trying to be, forced into...
Or like the you could set it up so that, like, the human brain part of him was interfacing with part of the computer, and it was using the computer to do things faster than the rest of the computer could do to stop him, kind of thing. You could do some cool stuff.
Yes,
with that.
Or even the doctor had put a failsafe in there that was protecting humanity.
Yeah, all kinds of really cool ideas that you could implement, but it sounds like they didn't.
They didn't do that. They were just looking at they were looking at a picture of parts of the brain lighting up and saying he's changing everything back, which.
Which is first off, they're telling, not showing, which is already a mistake, and second, they're doing it in a way that sounds too on the nose, too obvious. I don't know.
Telling, not showing has been the modus operandi of Hollywood for at least the past 15 years, and they don't seem to understand that that's bad. Either that, or you just have...
It's not that it's bad, it's that it's not preferable to the alternative. And the thing that you really don't want to do is you don't want to tell while you're showing at the same time.
Yeah, but I mean, that's... The biggest problem I have with most movies that come out anymore is that that's all they do, is they tell you, and they don't show you anything. Or if they do show you, they show you after they've told you, or like you said, while they're showing you, and it
seems like they're talking down to you.
It's just The Ring all over again. Again, it's
yeah.
I mean, that's why I use that one as the example, because I watched those movies practically back to back. I was like, oh, there was an American version. I check it out, and it's like, why did they explain all the things to me that the subtle parts of the film that weren't talking could have told me?
Because you're not capable of subtlety.
Yeah, it's actually one of the I'm convinced that the whole show don't tell thing is the reason why Japanese media blew up the way it did and overtook American comics with no difficulty.
Yeah.
I don't know. Questions? Is there anything else you'd like to know about Robocop 2014?
No, I mean, it's one of those... It sounds like it might actually be worth watching just to kind of get a feel for it at some point. But I'm not in any hurry. I actually have the first one and the director's cut of the first one on Blu-ray. So that I watched that last year, I think, sometime. And it's still really good.
Yeah, it was a lot better than I thought it would be when I finally went back and watched it.
No, it's one of the first. It's one of the first, like, violent movies that I saw as a kid, honestly. But I always saw, like, the TV version, so, like, a lot of the really bad stuff was cut out, but most of the movie was still there.
I do like being hypercritical about things like, movies that want to talk too much and not give me any substance, but I definitely kind of want to end this one on a good note. So I want to talk about why RoboCop 2 has one of my favorite endings of all time. Not even why. I just want to talk about that ending. It doesn't matter why. It's just when that movie ends, his partner is angry, looking at the head of the corporation driving away in a limousine while the press is trying to get a word out of him. He just takes off, and she's just shaking her head like he's going to get away. She goes, they're going to get away with it again. And RoboCop has a torque wrench on the side of his head, and he's twisting it over and over and just looking off into the distance, and he just goes, patience, Lewis, we're only human. And that's how the movie ends.
That's pretty good.
And there is so much that is right about it. It's funny. It's a message of hope. It's a good satire of the fact that he is both human and machine, and he thinks of himself as human more than machine, even though he's adjusting his own head with a wrench.
Right.
And it implies that there's a lot more to the story, even though I don't think we ever really get much more, because I don't think the third movie deals with that at all. I think the third movie was about some revolution or uprising.
I'm not sure what the third movie was about, but I haven't heard anything good about it.
But it's like it's one of my favorite endings ever. I watched it and it was just like it didn't even take 10 seconds for me to be like, this is a great ending. It was just like, this is really, really good. This is how a lot of movies should end. It's
well, it gives you the opportunity to hope for like it to be a cliffhanger, even if it turns out to not be a cliffhanger. But yeah, you're right. It gives you kind of a good message at the end of the movie where you're like, okay, I'm satisfied. Robocop is satisfied. You know, if there's more to this story, maybe there's more to this story.
Yeah, I think that there's a significant lack of good endings, not just in the sense that they're done well, but in the sense that a lot of movies seem to end on downers.
Yeah,
and I don't think...
Well, nowadays the only way to do a cliffhanger is to do a downer ending.
Well, there's that too. Like, even if you know something is going to get a sequel or going to continue into a series, they want to end it on a downer, which is... I think it's driving a lot of people away from the medium, because who wants to be down all the time with their entertainment? Like every time you entertain yourself, do you want to end on the note of, oh, well, that's really depressing? Every single time? Maybe once in a while, but like almost every episode...
Yeah, no, I get you.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I said I wanted to end this on a good note like that Robocop ending, but here I go. But almost every episode
we can always cut the recording right when you finish talking about the ending.
Yeah, we can. We can do that. We can totally do that. But now I want to get it off my chest.
Go for it.
Every TV series, virtually every episode, when it's a series that's going to go one episode to the next in a continuing story, every single one of those episodes has to end on a down note. Has to end with someone betraying someone. Has to end with someone dying. Has to end with someone... reflecting on something that
they did that was horrible.
Well, that they did, or that someone else did, or something that they have no control over. I mean,
that was horrible.
There are significantly less down points in people's lives than in most television shows at this point.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't watch TV anymore. I just watch Mahler and Friends dunk on Batwoman. That works pretty well.
Well, that ends on a happy note every time. Most of it is a happy note.
It depends on your definition of happy.
My happy note is I don't have to watch this ever.
It ends on laughter, but like it usually ends on something dumb happening.
But that can be funny.
Mind-bogglingly dumb.
I mean,
oh yeah, totally.
I mean, I'm a big fan of cartoons, and most of them end in some dumb way.
Sure. Like Grave of the Fireflies.
Well, that ended in a totally appropriate and comedic way. The bad guy of the movie died.
Smash comedy. All right, I think that's good. Should we stop?
I think we've done well here.
All right,
We're only human.